Hello, I'm Jeffrey Hamelman. I'm here in Vermont at King Arthur Flour's Baking Education Center. And today we're going to make Pâte Brisée, which is a fancy word that means pie dough. So we'll start right away going to the mixer and putting our dough together. Now we're going to mix the dough. In order to have a pie crust that's got a beautiful combination of flakiness and tenderness, there's a few rules that we have to abide by. First is our ingredients. We're using 50% medium protein white flour, unbleached. It's about 11.8% protein. Many people would call that all-purpose. Commercially, we call that Sir Galahad flour. All-purpose is a perfect substitute for that. And we've got 50% pastry flour. And the combination of these flours will give us that combination of tenderness and flakiness that we're looking for. The other thing we have is cubed cold unsalted butter that represents 75% of the combined flour weight. And last we've got water with salt dissolved in it. The reason we dissolve the salt is we don't want any kind of a granular taste in our mouth from the pie shell. If you're using a very fine salt, it's not crucial that you dissolve it. You could put that right in with your flour. However, if you're using a fairly coarse salt or a kosher salt, by all means go ahead and pre-dissolve it in your water. So that's the ingredients. The next important thing to making a good pie crust is to have all the ingredients completely cold. So these were scaled out yesterday and they've been under refrigeration. There go the two flours. And there's all the butter. We're going to paddle those together. And if you notice the initial size of the butter, our objective now is to break the butter down into smaller bits called shards. And we've got to be very careful. If we've got butter bits that are too large, they tend to make big voids in the baked shell as all the butter melts. On the other hand, if the shards are too small, we don't have a flaky crust. In fact, you can easily ruin this, even though there's no water in here now. If we just paddled this until the butter was completely broken down, it would form a paste that would not be usable. So we want to break the butter down until the shard size is, I guess often you'll see it referred to as the size of peas. One of the things that I look for is, I look to see a very slight yellowing of the flour. That's an indication that things are moving along well. This will take usually, a couple of minutes depending on your batch size. You do it only on first speed, and again, you only do it with a paddle. Okay, so now I see that the butter is breaking down nicely. There's still some pretty big bits like here. So these big bits I'll just break in half or so, and I'll go around and find those in the bowl. I want to work quickly because it's very important that things stay very, very cold throughout the process of mixing the dough. In fact, if you're doing this in a particularly hot kitchen, at this point, when the butter has been broken down properly, you could take the bowl with the flour and butter in it and the paddle and just put it in the refrigerator for a half an hour to get things nice and cold again. This is the time when gluten can start developing in the dough, and we want to be very, very careful not to allow the gluten to develop, because then that would give us a tough crust. So I'm going to turn this on, and as soon as I do, I'll add all the water in a nice quick stream. When it's about 85 or 90% mixed, I'm going to turn off the mixer and just scrape the moisture off the paddle. We want to remember that the definition of pâte brisée is broken dough, brisée meaning broken. So we want to be careful that we don't overmix it here. It's going to look quite broken when it's done, as you'll see. I'm going to give this just a couple more turns, and then we'll put it out onto a workbench to finish the dough. Now our dough is mixed, and this clearly shows you why it's called broken dough or pâte brisée. Now I'm going to turn the dough out onto the bench. There may be some bits of flour that did not get incorporated. Don't worry about those. We're going to incorporate them using the heel of our hand. It's a technique called phrase, where we just kind of smear with the heel of our hand to bring any unhydrated bits of flour into the mix. I'm just going to fashion it without any kneading motions at all into a reasonably even rectangle. Now I'm going to transfer the dough onto this piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to very loosely wrap it up. The reason I do this loosely is because the next thing I'm going to do, you could theoretically put it into refrigeration right now, but just take another little moment. Whether you're going to roll it by hand later, or if you're going to use a dough sheeter in a commercial situation, in either instance, you're better off by starting with a nice flat rectangle. If you'll notice, we've still got shards of butter that are quite visible. That's an important sign, because if they were all gone, again, we would compromise the quality of our crust. Now I'll transfer the dough onto a sheet pan, and now I've got two options. I can refrigerate it, let it relax ideally until tomorrow, and then roll this out into shells. Optionally, I can double wrap this and freeze it, and it should last for weeks if you've got a good 0-degree freezer or lower. So you can make this up in bulk, freeze some, and take it out as you need it, which can be pretty efficient in a commercial situation. So there we have it. That's the mixing portion of the dough. And from here, we're going to now roll out the dough, make a bunch of products with it, and talk about some of the other possibilities.